Hello and welcome. My name is Givius. In this episode, you're going to learn about setting up an AWS account from scratch, right at the beginning, setting up an account, creating an admin user, and then using that account to eventually show a website on the public internet. All of this you're going to learn today in just a couple of minutes. Stick around for the end for a bonus section on how to secure some of your AWS resources and some of the best practices you should be using whenever you're dealing with cloud infrastructure. Let's go. Firstly, so cool that you've decided to start on a journey on building our cloud infrastructure. I'm going to be covering a lot of the basics today on just getting started, but there is a treasure trove of information that's waiting for you. And it's super cool and fun. Plus, you could make a career out of this as well if you wanted to. Anyway, with all that aside, let's get started in setting up an AWS account. The first thing you need to do is go to the website and go through the account setup process. Now, one caveat here is that you are going to have to put in credit card information because some of the resources will require some money, right? Mostly that's localized to CPU resources, so compute power that you're going to be using, and network traffic. A lot of the AWS products do have free tiers available that you can use, and my episodes are going to predominantly use those that are free. I'm not expecting anyone to pay anything to get started, so we're going to be focusing on using free infrastructure. But just bear in mind that some of the things do cost money, and they're not necessarily warnings that are going to tell you, hey, this is going to cost a whole lot of money if you make a mistake. So just be super careful. If you follow these instructions in this video, there shouldn't be a problem. But just in your own experimentation and your own learning and exploring, just be careful that whenever you're creating resources, you don't inadvertently forget to switch them off or end up spending money. Just keep that window open for a second and go to your terminal. You'll need to install the AWS CLI tools. CLI stands for Command Line Interface, so that you can use these credentials that we just created from your actual computer. What you can do is you can download them. The download instructions are on the AWS website. And once you've downloaded and installed the CLI, you can start using this IAM user you just created. Once you've gone through the setup process, the next thing you want to do is set up an IAM user. Now, IAM stands for Identity and Access Management. And you could see an IAM user kind of like yourself. This user is going to have credentials and access to do all kinds of things. So the first thing we're going to do is create an admin user that essentially has access to administrate your account. That means creating resources, deleting them, adding files, removing files, whatever it takes. This IAM user is going to have the access to do all of that. Just bear in mind that anyone who gets access to this IAM user will have access to your account. So you need to pay special attention to not let other people use these credentials, share them with anyone, or leak them in any kind of way. Don't do what I'm doing here, which is making these credentials known to the world. Don't worry, they don't exist anymore if you're watching this video. But for the purposes of this video, I wanted to keep it up so that you can have an idea of what they look like and what to do with them. In the terminal, type AWS space configure. And then you can copy in the access key into where it says access key, and you can do the same for the secret key. Select the default region. I'm from South Africa originally, so I would have just used AF South 1. Is that right? AF South 1? I think so, Africa South 1. Whichever one is closest to you is probably the one you want to use. Edit the credentials file, and at the top of the configuration, you're going to change it to admin. Now this means that whenever you type in a CLI command, you have to specify the profile of this account. And we do this on purpose because whenever you're using any kind of administrative rights, you want to explicitly call those out. It's just going to prevent mistakes. That's its key purpose, preventing mistakes, because a lot of these mistakes cannot be undone. There's no undo key when you delete a whole lot of files. So it's just one little extra step to help remind you and whoever else that you're using a user that has a lot of access and you need to be especially careful. Great, so now that we've got the setup, let's try it out. First thing we're going to do is we're going to create a S3 bucket. An S3 bucket's kind of like a big bag or like a file system. It can have folders, it can have other files, and that's what we're going to use to put in files that we're going to host for our website. I've created this little hello world file over here, and after I create the bucket, I'm going to then copy the file to the bucket. There we go. You can see it succeeded. And if you wanted to, you could go to the actual URL in a web browser to see what that file looks like. Well, it's not there. And that's a good thing because by default, the S3 bucket is secured so that you can't just access it from anywhere. If you wanted to change that, you can run another command to open up this bucket to the world. So what you can do is set up a file that defines the credentials and access for this S3 bucket. I've already pre-created one, as you can see, and then we're going to apply these credentials to the bucket using the admin user, of course. Now that that's done, let's go back to our browser, see if this works. And there you go. Awesome. You've just created a website using an S3 bucket. And this is a free website. You can now go and make changes to the file, upload them back to the bucket, click refresh in your browser. And this is a very rudimentary deployment process to give you and other people access to a website that anyone in the world can access. That's pretty cool. And now for the bonus tip on how to secure your bucket. We've been doing all of this with the main IAM admin user. This is really not such a good idea. You can use the admin user for initial infrastructure setup because it's quick and easy, but really once you know that you've got the infrastructure you need to use a specific IAM user for that infrastructure. The reason you're doing that is to avoid any potential mistakes because like I said, there is no undo function. This time, instead of going through the web console, we're just going to use the admin user to create another IAM user. I'm going to go ahead and create a new IAM user, give it a cool name, and there we go. Now we have a new IAM user. Next, what you want to do is you want to give this IAM user access to your bucket. If you just try to use this IAM user, which is now the default user, to put a file in the bucket, you can see that you can't do that. You can't just put a file in there. You need to give that IAM user access to put the file. You're going to need to create an IAM policy that gives access to this new user to your bucket. So here we are. We're going to create a policy for the specific IAM user. And we're going to give this IAM user the ability to create and delete and update and read files from that bucket. This user is not going to have access to anything else. This user won't be able to create new resources, new buckets, new databases, any of that kind of stuff. It won't even be able to delete this bucket itself. And what you can do though is just update the contents in this bucket. And that's going to cover probably 90% of our use cases. Now we're going to apply this policy to the user using the admin user. And finally, here we go. You can update the file using this new IAM user and make it available on the public internet. And that's really the pattern you want to use. Use the admin user for initial infrastructure setup. Be very careful. And then once you know what you have, you want to use a specific different user that has much more limited access. So when you make a mistake, the access is automatically denied. And that's going to save you a world of hurt. That's it for today. I hope you learned something new today. I hope you get to play around a little bit with these resources. Remember, they're all free for the moment. Just don't upload massive files like videos and so on into those buckets and start streaming movies to the buckets. But for basic playing around with, this should all be in the free tier, so you don't have anything to worry about. If you enjoyed this video, please do give this video a like and leave some comments. I'm really interested to see what you thought about it and also what you'd like me to cover in the future. I do want to make cloud infrastructure super accessible to everyone. So nothing is too small, nothing is too big. Anything along the lines of cloud infrastructure, from basic things like this, using just the command line tools, to things that are much more complicated, like building enterprise systems using AWS. All of that is in scope. So drop me a note, tell me what you want to see, and I will make a plan to get that through to you. Until next time, goodbye.